Hello, and welcome to the Navigating Difference Cultural Awareness hosts webinar. Thank you all for joining, and we'll keep this recorded if you have other folks who are interested in viewing it at a later time. But what we wanted to share with you a little bit about the program. I know many of you have been through the Cultural Awareness module, and so wanted to let you know how you might be able to help kind of spread the word and keep momentum going in your communities through this program and through our team. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute your mic and go ahead and ask, or if you prefer, you can go ahead and type in the chat window. So I've got both of those options up there. Thanks again for joining us. All right. Well, first off, I just wanted to share a little bit about, share a little bit about the Navigating Difference program and some reasons why communities may be interested, especially now in having a program like this. And traveling around many Indiana communities, we know that a lot of groups, from leadership groups that you may be involved with to Rotary clubs and others, law enforcement, there's just a lot of conversation, especially right now, about how to talk about difference in communities. And there are many communities that are seeking safe spaces to talk about difference and diversity in a way that is welcoming across the community. And we feel that the Navigating Difference program offers that. As you may have noticed, if your community is anything like mine, it's a fairly polarized political climate right now, and there are some real challenges talking across tables in communities about hot issues, and that extends through a lot of difference in our communities. And as well, there are some heightened fears and concerns about specific kinds of discrimination, whether that's in the workplace, in the community at large, or otherwise. And also, one of the things that Extension can do, we do it all the time, is convene and provide education. So this can be a role that fits well within our Extension mission. I know Katie has been through the 3-day program, so the Navigating Difference branded program is a 3-day cultural competence training. It's a copyrighted curriculum that's packaged in a specific way that was developed by Washington State University Extension for, specifically they started it for their staff and then also extended it to community practitioners. And so now when Washington State University offers their Navigating Difference program, they typically offer it up in a joint session for both staff and community folks to come together. When I say staff, I mean their extension, campus and field staff, as well as community partners, professionals who are working with a broader community. So they work with law enforcement, educators, K-12 educators, healthcare, people in the wellness sphere, things like that. The curriculum is research-based. There are research-based modules, as well as there's some evidence-based support for the actual training program. If anybody's interested in that, you can let me know, and I'll get you to the website for more details on that. And then I do want to share with you that in order to be a cultural competence module trainer or Navigating Difference trainer, you have to go through Washington State's Train the Trainer program. And so currently we have a Navigating Difference team of 10 folks at Purdue who have been through that Train the Trainer and are approved to go ahead and teach that. We are open to expanding that team and would appreciate others down the line, especially if this program continues to grow, as we hope it will. But you do have to go through those steps in order to become a trainer. So the first of the 5 modules of that bigger 3-day Navigating Difference is called Cultural Awareness. And so that's usually like a 3 to 4 hour interactive workshop module. Many of you all went through this through your area meetings a couple years ago. We went to all of the area meetings, and currently new educators then also go through the cultural awareness module. It's typically led by a team of 2 from our Navigating Difference team, and here you can see who those individuals are, and if you would like information about their counties or where they're located, I can help out with that. So Katie Zuber and I help coordinate this team, and then everyone else has been actively delivering the program throughout the state with different audiences, both our own staff, whether it's educators or CWCs or support staff, campus groups. There was a group from forestry that went through part of the training as well, and community groups. So there have been several events held. Putnam County had a group, as well as recently there was an MLK Day open session that was in partnership in, I believe it was Wabash County that did that. So we have done this with some different audiences. I also wanted to say, just so that you know kind of what we're thinking about when we are thinking about hosting this in a community, that it's typically with a group of 15 to 30 participants. Some of you, I know Chrissy is involved with the leadership group, and Jennifer, your county has a community leadership program as well. We have done Navigating Difference as a part of that diversity day through the leadership program. That's an option that you can do as well. And typically those groups are like 15 to 20 people, and so that has worked as a good size for it. When we've done it in the past, we've done as many as 30. It gets a little bit busy with a group that's larger than 30, and there's not as much time for the larger group to share out if it gets much bigger than that. We also find that in groups, much smaller than 15, there's not enough people and interest in diversity in the room to really generate as rich a discussion as if you had kind of that sweet spot between 15 and 20. So again, the cultural awareness module is the one that you went through, and I'll go through just very briefly some of the activities that are in that to jog your memory. But the purpose of this one and why we start here is it is really focusing on the individual. So if we think about ourselves and our own culture and then work from that and think about other people's culture, it's developmentally a helpful place to start. So in that first cultural awareness module, we're really exploring what is culture, what does it mean to have our, these personal cultural values, biases, prejudices, views. How do we develop those? And then what are some of the differences and similarities that we have among our colleagues and those who might be going through this program with us, those in our community? And really starting to recognize that we do have our own cultures. We even have our own organizational cultures, and then what that looks like and how we can then start to think about making that more inclusive. So if you remember, we start out that training with this diversity wheel, and this is a model that we found really helpful for groups in thinking about different kinds of dimensions of diversity. I think sometimes we think about that primary dimension that's kind of around our personality, but secondary dimensions can help folks in your communities really think about other ways in which there may be some differences that are causing some challenges in their workplaces or in their community, and things to think about there. And sometimes, the secondary and organizational dimensions, I meant to say on that. All right. We also, in that program, talk about, I don't know if you remember lining up in that spectrum activity where, folks who were born in a very rural place or raised in a very rural community might be on one end of the spectrum, and then folks who were raised in a more urban environment might line up on the other side of the room. There are a bunch of different questions that can be asked during that activity. But this helps generate some of those questions about how did I develop my values? How did where I grew up or how I grew up affect my values, my beliefs, my customs, and my behaviors? And then we jump into a little bit on bias, how it's called the preference to oppression slope, and this is another model that cultural awareness dips into, doesn't get into too much depth, but really starting to think about these terms and what they mean. And then also what it means to stereotype. Probably many of you remember doing the quiz where you have to guess who has what profession. And this is an updated one probably since when you all did it. But you know, who's the physicist and who is the astronaut and things like that. And then wrapping up the program, talking about value orientations, and specifically as we experience them in our own organization and maybe in our own groups. How do we really think about some of these bigger questions? And again, that's a research-based model that's widely used. So again, I'll remind everybody who's on the webinar today, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or go ahead and unmute your mic or your phone and jump right in. But what we wanted to share with you are a little bit about how we're envisioning working together with the Navigating Difference team and local folks. And I see that Jennifer Cannon is on as well, and she served in this host role in Putnam County for Navigating Difference Cultural Awareness module. And so she can also help answer some of these questions about how that worked with her and any suggestions that she might have. So what as a host, what you would be signing on for, so we typically recommend, as with many other programs, is to work with either your advisory board or your extension board or some other group, or form a little steering committee. It doesn't have to be a lot of people, but maybe 3 or 4 people, to start to plan and publicize. With this kind of program, having a couple of people to bounce ideas off of about how to publicize, how to get the word out, how to message some of these things can be very helpful. And then with that group, working to arrange a time and location, and also figuring out a plan for catering. Being mindful that it is, you know, typically 3.5 hour program. It's usually nice to at least have some refreshments, if not a meal, for that. And thinking about, you know, are we going to do this in the morning, or is it kind of a late work day kind of thing? Maybe, you know, 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock kind of thing. And then, you know, what kind of food would be appropriate for those things? If it's an evening program, again, it's fairly long, so you might want to plan for a dinner during that time, or, you know, adding on a half an hour so that folks have a chance to eat and visit and really deepen their connections. We do ask that you pay the trainer mileage. Katie and I, you can reach out to Katie Zuber and I, and we can figure out what the trainers are who might be available, or if you know that you're in a certain part of the state and the closest people to you would be Jan Dugan and Katie Zuber. Maybe you're in the Southwest. Go ahead and contact them and arrange dates that work for all of you. We do ask you to pay their mileage because as county educators, we're trying to make this system as sustainable as possible for all of us, and we wouldn't expect their counties to pay them to come to your community. So that's part of that budgeting process, which we can talk about in just a little bit. And then the big piece here really is publicizing locally, and sometimes that's going to include, although the typical things like email and social media and your website, we can help you out with press release and stuff like that. It may also take some personal conversations with folks or with groups, or, you know, standing up at your local Rotary meeting and letting folks know that this is available. You may also want to have some of those conversations ahead of time so that you know you have an audience core before even in starting down that path. And so as a host again, typically for Extension, you would be in charge of registering your participants and collecting fees. And then either you can order your notebooks or we can help you figure out how to do that. We can order them and have them sent to you, but it's usually easier if you just keep the money in your office and go ahead and pay that out. But it doesn't usually take 3 weeks, but I like to give 3 weeks just in case there's some delay on the notebook. So you can order them. This is the address for Washington State's Ed Store. And then it's the host who typically completes the digital measure since they know who and how many people are there. And then it's the trainers who will do the evaluation piece. All right. And I've mentioned a few of these, and every community is going to be different. But some of the kinds of partners who may be a really good fit for this kind of program, and it might be a nice opportunity to reach out to some of these groups as well. Certainly community foundations. They may even be a good co-host or sponsor, or they may even be willing to consider funding the program in your county. Also, as I'm sure you're connected with in your communities, your United Ways, nonprofits, social service groups as well. We found a lot of folks from local governments are also interested. You know, everybody works with people and is trying to figure out how to get better at working with people and communicating across difference. So typically, you know, your health departments, parks departments, a lot of folks in city and county government are interested in these kinds of things as well. Emergency responders have been very interested, whether it's, you know, fire departments, police, other law enforcement, court system. It could even be like CASA volunteers, social workers, other groups as well. Schools and libraries. Of course, if you're working with schools, then you want to figure out what your timeline is ahead of time so that you know when their staff might be able to attend or might be interested in attending, particularly if they have some kind of back to school in-service day. That's typically a good time for this kind of programming. We don't have it arranged for CEU credit, but that might be something that we could work out together with their group. You know, we can send the curriculum and see if that's a good fit. I think there have been groups in the past who have gotten CEU credit for this through Purdue. And I see some agreement from Jennifer that CASA volunteers are a good fit as well. And I know several of you are connected with CASA volunteers in this, and they have to go through some training. I think foster parents have to go through some training, so those might be some other kinds of audiences in your community. Libraries, higher ed, preschools, you name it. Service clubs are a good place to get the word out and maybe figuring out if there are some business partners as well who might be interested. Service clubs like your Kiwanis and Rotary, Lions, whatever you have in your community. And then, of course, our extension groups. You never want to leave them out. And you may have some specific citizen and advocacy groups that might be organized. You know, I'm thinking League of Women Voters or some other group that you might have in your community that's focused on an issue, or maybe a disability rights group or something that is working across the dimensions of diversity who might specifically be drawn to a program like this. I didn't add businesses on here, but there are many, many types of customer-oriented businesses, community-oriented businesses that also may be interested as well. But I think we are typically focusing on some of these other partners and communities. So whatever works for you, I think the interest is out there. It's just kind of a matter of matching the programming and the needs and the timing and all of that with communities in the way that they want to connect. Any questions or further ideas about this list? Okay. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the funding. What we suggest is that you go ahead and develop your own cost recovery budget and figure out how you want to do this. Again, it's typically the cost of those notebooks plus the mileage for the trainers and the food. So, figuring out those three kinds of expenditures for you, of course, if you have a lot more people, if you're towards the 30 people end of the spectrum, then you can usually charge a little bit lower price because the mileage is going to be less. But at least per person, you're going to have that notebook and whatever food that you're providing. So there may be a bunch of different ways to do it. I think we're looking, if you think about those numbers, maybe an average of $400 to $500 to fund the whole thing. If you have, a modest amount of food, it could go a little bit up from there if you're providing a full meal, or with a bigger group, it might go down from there with less food and a smaller group. But you may want to go ahead and approach a community partner to fund the whole thing, and then you wouldn't have to charge a fee to participants. Recognizing though that then they may not show up if they stay there, and you may not have as much control over that if they're not involved in paying a fee to attend. You could do sponsorships. You could do food sponsorships and kind of split the cost, maybe a registration fee that covers the notebook and then somebody else sponsors the food, something like that. This might be one of those programs where you want to go ahead and spend some 310 or Ed Fund monies to make it go because of the potential of impact and building relationships with certain groups in your community. And then, of course, the registration fee is always an option. If you don't want to fundraise, that's another way to go, just to put a registration fee on it and keep it simple. So what we can provide from our Navigating Difference team are templates for flyers, press release, an outreach list, a Qualtrics, simple Qualtrics registration if you're interested in any of that. We can help answer any questions, whether it's with your planning team or community participants or a group that's looking to send several folks to something like this. And of course, we'll conduct the workshop on that day and evaluate it. We can also kind of talk with folks if they're interested in attending the 3-day training, share a little bit about kind of next steps for that group as well. All right. Well, so landing at questions. Does anybody who is on the call have any questions about the program or anything for each other that you want to ask?
Chris, this is Crystal.
Yeah.
So is this just like a one-day workshop then, or is this more of a series, or could it be worked into some sort of ongoing thing?
Yeah, great question. So the piece that we're talking about is the cultural awareness piece, and that's like 3 or 4 hours, depending on how you set that up. And so that is kind of the option that's on the table. Now, if you have a committed group and they really want to go through the full series, the Navigating Difference program, that's a little bit more involved and would probably take a number of conversations and contracting to figure out how all of those logistics work. Part of that is that we do that program in 3 trainers, and it has to be a consistent group of participants across all sessions. So, like, you couldn't have somebody coming to the second session if they missed the first one. And if they, are going to the first 3, then we would want them to continue on through 4 and 5. But we're working with the Girl Scouts statewide to have their staff going through the full series, and we're going to break it up so that each of those the modules of the 3-day, rather than having one big 3-day training session for them, we're going to break it up into modules. So it can be done, but they are really committing to be there for all of them.
This is Jennifer in Davies County.
Hey.
Jennifer in Putnam County, can you comment what your group did after they went through the training?
Sure. I really didn't hear. Can you repeat the question? I heard Putnam County.
Yeah, Jennifer was asking what happened after the training in your community. You could share a little bit.
After the training, we sort of formed like a coalition to see what was next, and we sort of gathered a focus. And that focus was to really get law enforcement involved in cultural awareness and diversity training. And that's still a work in progress that we're trying to do.
Can you repeat part of that? I didn't get all of it.
Yes. So they started kind of a coalition, and then they developed a focus, and one of their focuses that they talked about was getting law enforcement more involved in conversations about diversity.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, within the cultural awareness module, there's not a lot of time for planning on next steps. So that might be, something that your planning team would want to build into that, either, extending it and making it a longer day, which I don't know that I would recommend that, but, or having some kind of mechanism, whether it's as simple as, gathering people's email addresses up to see, who wants to take that next step together, maybe have a second follow-up planning meeting or something like that.
Yeah, that's what my question was, is after you do this, then what's the next step going to be?
Right. All right. Well, thanks again for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it. I just want to apologize on behalf of Katie, Katie, I'm looking at your name. Katie Zuber had an emergency and wasn't able to be with us today. But she's a real champion of this program and a great person to work with. So feel free to reach out to Katie or me or anybody on the Navigating Difference team if you have any questions about the program, or if you're thinking about doing it, we can kind of help you set up a timeline and figure out what might make sense, help you through any aspect of figuring this out together. So with that, we'll sign off and hope that you all have a fabulous week here. All right. Take care.